morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you happen to be watching. Welcome to the Six Bugle Podcast. I'm your host, Rudy Ruiz, and today I have a super special guest. I know I always say I have a special guest today, but I got a super special guest today. A longtime friend of mine who is a fire chief from Jersey City at one point. He was also a deputy U.S. fire administrator for a time. But more importantly, where I met him was when he was a superintendent of the National Fire Academy, Dr. Denis Onieal. Doc, how are you, sir?
Very good, Chief. It's great to see you. I was just saying that we've been friends for about 20 years. I can't believe, how fast the time has flown and how well you've done.
Yes, the time certainly does fly fast, doesn't it? But yeah,
You
I
had
think
dark hair then.
right.
Me
Right.
too.
Yeah, yeah. I just came back from a funeral service for one of my fire
Oh,
chiefs in a volunteer department yesterday, and I hadn't seen those guys in a long time, and they immediately recognized my graying hair, and I was like, "Well, you're getting a lot older too. We're not getting any younger, right?"
they don't care who you are, they got to pick on you, right?
Right, right. But it was good seeing all those folks, and it's good seeing you here. It certainly is a pleasure. We go way back, and I said earlier you're a fantastic storyteller. So I said I got to get the doc on the podcast. So thank you very much for joining us here today. I just have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
So basically, the Six Bugle podcast is based on the Six Bugle Conference, which is a conference for fire service administrative assistants. Now, I'm sure that you had a wonderful administrative assistant when you were at the academy, or even with Jersey City. Tell us a story of one of your administrative assistants that may have made your job or even your life easier.
Chief, my opening statement on this is that your administrative assistant is the most powerful person in the entire organization. They're the people who determine what you see and don't see. They're the people who determine who gets in to see you and who doesn't get in to see you. They kind of block traffic for you, and they provide you what I'm going to call inside baseball information. They are the ones that can take the temperature of the organization and give you the kind of feedback you want as long as you establish a relationship with them that lets them do that. And early on in all of my different, uh, what I would try to do is after 4 or 5 years, encourage them to take a promotion in the organization to get them out of the rat race. And every one of them got promoted out, except the last one that I had was a deputy fire administrator, and she didn't want the promotion. She liked what she was doing.
Mhm.
But they are not they're not spies and they're not undercover agents for you, but they can tell you things that you need to know that perhaps sometimes people are afraid to give you bad news. And I always encouraged my administrators, actually everybody in the organization, I want to hear the bad news soon. I want to hear it as soon as we know it because that's going to give me enough time to solve the problem. I don't need to have a hand grenade with no pin on my desk. And the administrative assistant was the one that was the most valuable in that responsibility.
Right.
And and some of the social things that were going on in the organization that I may have had an ear for. Somebody who's in the middle of a divorce, or somebody had a parent or a child who was particularly ill. And ordinarily that won't filter up in a large organization to the chief or the superintendent. So they would tell me, and then I would, stop by and see the person, or, I heard this, and are we taking care of you? Is there anything that you need? So there was kind of an official doorkeeper, um, gatekeeper type of a role. And then there was I want to call it the human being kind of a role where they kept me informed about some of the events that may not have reached my desk that were going on in the organization.
Right. That's very profound that you say that because we in our marketing we call them the gatekeepers.
Oh,
They
okay.
they keep the people that you want in, allow them in and keep the people that you don't necessarily want, keep them out. But you're absolutely right. They're the integral part of the communication link, right, between the firefighters or even the community, the people that visit,
Hmm.
and or even the elected officials that, and I'm glad you said that they're not spies because you're absolutely right. That's not what we're trying to make them out to be, or that's not what you should be incorporating them as, right? They're a valuable resource, and that's why I think that's why we created the Sixth Bugle, because they are a valuable resource. And chief is five bugles. We believe that they deserve an extra bugle. That's why we came up with that name. But more importantly, we want to let the chiefs know that they do have value, that they can bring you additional resources. And that's what we're trying to provide the administrative assistants, is the additional resources that become another arm for your abilities to lead and your communication skills. Yeah. So go ahead.
The other role that they played was, well, I'm not sure if I have the right word for it, but they knew if I was stepping over the line. Okay. And I always gave them permission. Look, if I'm doing something wrong here, you better, tell me right away, And they might hear me say something in a meeting, and they kind of hold back and they give me this, nod type thing, or I don't know how to describe that person, but it was, I shouldn't, I don't know how to describe that role. What title would I put on it?
Right.
Um, they were an administrative conscience, maybe, or an organizational conscience that said, you're getting pretty close to the red line here. Be careful. Or if there was something that was, going on down in headquarters and, in the federal service that they were aware of that I may not have been aware of because of the circle that they are in, the administrative circles that they're in, that, I'm just not aware of it.
Right.
So they would kind of guide me on that one as well. But they always had that permission. They always had the role of, if I'm doing something wrong here, you tell me right away.
Right, right. Yeah, that's key. And to be able to even say that to administrative assistants, you got to have a close relationship to begin with. And that's what we're trying to build here. We're trying to build a close relationship between the fire chief or the head of the department so that they know that they can know, like, and trust them.
Mhm.
And once they have that capacity, they can do so much more for the organization, for themselves, and for their own mental health. You know as well as I do, there's so much uh, bad stuff going on right now. And if you look at the internet, there's tons of information, but not very much knowledge, right? Not a lot of knowledge going out there. So we want to be able to utilize as many avenues as we can, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Good for you.
Yeah, thank you. So I know you're all over the country speaking and still doing things. Tell me about what's going on in the doc's life right now.
Well, what I've decided to do, I mean, one of the this was more or less a whole process, Chief. When I was coming up to 25 years of service in the federal government. I was approaching age 70 or just about, and I knew I was, you're not going to live forever, and I want to make sure that I had a smooth transition at the fire administration. So I announced my retirement and sent out all the information about a year ahead of time. And in the federal service, once you do that, it allows the wheels to start turning to replace you. And what I wanted to do was to get all of the senior positions locked down before the presidential election in 2020. Because as the presidential election approaches, things slow down in the federal government. People don't want to make decisions because they don't want to incur, you know, make it rules for the next administration. So they kind of slow down. So about a year out, I announced my retirement, and we got all of the senior positions locked down. And in January of 2020, I retired, and in November of 2020, of course, was the election. So, what was I going to do? Well, believe it or not, I worked smack dab into COVID. Six weeks later, everything shut down. I kid around. I said, well, the whole federal government fell apart when I retired. It wasn't true, of course. But it gave me a little reflecting time. And I've decided that with the rest of my life, for as long as I'm physically and cognitively able to do it, I want to give back. So I've been on the speaking circuit, most of the major organizations, state organizations, talking to fire officers about leadership, about, for example, the decisions that were going on when I was sent up to the World Trade Center on September 12th, 2001. Unfortunately, in 1995, I was a deputy fire chief, and I gave two firefighters an order, and they were killed doing it. One of them, Carlos Negron, his son saw his father get killed. One of the two was successfully resuscitated. They were both electrocuted. But Carlos unfortunately never was able to get back. So I talk about it. The title of that talk is 4 minutes and 6 seconds, and a line of duty death and what it's like to be the incident commander or something like that. And then what's the aftermath of all of that? You have to go to the funeral. You have to talk to the family. Um, the lawsuits and the investigations and all that. So, and then I talk to folks about what they can do. Not that you're going to be able to prevent a line of duty death, but things to think about when you're 2 and 3 and 4 minutes into an emergency event, and what you got to be thinking about. Because if you look at the data, the great majority of line of duty deaths occur in that first 5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
It's a, and you don't realize it, how quickly something like that will happen. So those are the kind of lessons I talk about leadership, not the theories of leadership, but the everyday practical behaviors that you need to do to be a successful leader. And there's simple things like when I'd visit fire stations, and when I did, it was for a meal, and I never talked about the job. You know, how's your kid doing in college? And I understand your mom is sick. How's she doing? Those kind of social interactions, so that the men and women in your organization know that you're a human being. That some days you come out and you got a flat tire, and the dog bit somebody, and you have a life like they have a life. And those are the leadership lessons that unfortunately or unfortunately sometimes, Chief, don't show up in a book.
Right.
you
Right.
know
No, you're absolutely right. I was just reading a book. I just finished a book by Stephanie Chung called Ally Leadership: How to Lead Those Who Are Not Like You. And she
Mhm.
mentioned the fact that it's about going back there, and I immediately pictured myself, and sometimes I didn't do those things. And I learned from those. And we're human beings. We all make mistakes. But I realize that now that that was a mistake that I didn't do as often as I should have. Just go back in the back and start talking to the crew about those types of things that you mentioned, about how are they doing? How are their kids doing? How are the spouse? Things that don't have to do with the fire service or your job that you're doing right now. And that's what makes that personal connection click. And once that happens, now you have other things that you are associated with, and that brings you closer to your team. You're absolutely right.
The other piece of it too, Chief, is the fact that, and you and I know this, we've talked about it. When things are going south in an organization, when problems begin to emerge, and they always do, because we're an organization of human beings, people feel comfortable coming to you and telling you the bad news. And I always welcomed the bad news, because it gave me time to figure out how to solve the problem. Whereas if somebody's afraid to give you bad news, that's going to show up on your desk as a hand grenade with no pin in it.
Right.
You're not going to have the time, or it's going to be in the headlines tomorrow. So if you have that personal relationship with people, that gives them that grace, to that comfortableness, to come to you and say, "Hey, do you know that this is going on?" Or whatever the problem is.
Right.
And administrative assistants are great at that. They're the ones that can often tell you, give you the temperature of what's going on in the organization
Right.
so that you can nip problems in the bud.
Excellent. Yes, absolutely. So I know you do a lot of traveling, you do a lot of speaking. You have a wealth of wisdom that needs to be shared. And I know that there's probably a lot of people that haven't heard you speak or haven't heard your stories. I mean, I can't imagine because being with the National Fire Academy, you've um, led and you've inspired people from all over the world. And I was fortunate enough that on every EFO class that I was in, I had someone from a different part of the world. So that was kind of neat to be able to say that. And if they like, I absolutely, my favorite story of yours is the story of the young Vietnam veteran that came back. I won't go into any details, but the young Vietnam veteran that came back and had to figure out what he needed to do with the rest of his life. And I'll save that one for you folks out there. You want to hear that story, you gotta invite Dr. Onieal. So if they want to invite you to their conference or visit their station, how can they get a hold of you?
Two ways. Email is D as in Delta, ONIEAL at Comcast.net, or my cell is 717-253-2320. Just give me a call. Let me know what you need.
All right, that sounds good. And we'll have that information at the end of this podcast so that you can reach out to Dr. Onieal. You got to have him out, come out to your conference or to your station because he's a fantastic speaker and you'll be inspired. He still has a lot of knowledge to share. Doc, I certainly do appreciate you. I'm getting goosebumps here. I do appreciate seeing you
It's probably
again.
too cold out there in Ohio.
I've always appreciated seeing you again in different conferences around the country, and I always make sure I give you a big old hug, and I'll be sure to do that again next time we see each other. And again, thank you very much for joining us here on the Six Bugle podcast. We certainly do appreciate it. And for you folks out there, we're going to have a fourth annual Six Bugle Conference here in Perrysburg, Ohio, September 17th to the 19th. We have some great speakers lined up. Registration will be opening soon. You can register now, actually, but the kickoff hasn't been official yet. We're going to do that here sometime soon. But if you're interested in coming out, we got some great speakers, and we're looking forward to see you all again. Doc, thanks again for stopping by. I do appreciate
Good
it.
seeing you, brother.
All right, we'll
Talk to you soon. Bye.
take care.